Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because TV data has been with us for a long time in various different forms. But when we talk about advanced TV data, we're really talking about set-top box and ACR data, right? And that's call it a 5 to 7 year arc. And early on, when we entered the sort of ACR space as a buyer, it was a commodity that a lot of folks had access to, right? Many data companies were making their data available. Then sort of, pandemic hit, a lot of these companies started to move into a space where they wanted to own the relationship with the advertiser. And so data started to get a little bit more locked down. So Vizio sort of brought their data in-house. Roku obviously, has some of that as well, and other providers. And it feels like we're turning the cycle a little bit more, right? Like we're seeing partners who have built really successful media arms now have gotten over the messy middle of like, hey, what's my value proposition? I need to be very defensive to make sure advertisers get it. Now they're on the other side going, okay, here's a relationship around media. And now how can I use the data to my advantage, make it more transparent for the advertiser, and build a two-way communication sort of funnel where, you can get access to more data, but it also means maybe a bigger investment with the provider.
Given that progress, are we any closer to this perfect marriage of digital advertising and television? And do we want to go there where everyone's getting a unique ad when they're watching TV?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Like we're sort of always going back and forth with what we can technically do, right? And what problems are interesting technically to solve, and then what we should do, right? Like, should we get into a space where every ad is addressable, every single impression is led to whether it converts or not? I think, the important thing for me is TV, and you've got to treat it like TV. It's not just another screen in a programmatic buy. It's not just another screen in a digital buy. It is TV, right? And so the things it does really well is it leaves a brand impression. Brands have the opportunity to tell stories to a consumer. That storytelling needs to happen to a consumer that's ready for a brand message or is within a sort of target for a brand. But it's less important that you can individually understand each consumer until you start to get to sort of mid-funnel, bottom-funnel campaigns, right? And there's a class of advertising where that's really important too. But we also don't want to lose out on the strength of TV, which is delivering great stories to consumers.
Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about programmatic. We've seen a lot of interesting movement in terms of like, in the name of SPO or clear supply path, you have DSPs seemingly going around SSPs and vice versa. What do you make of where that's headed?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? You would think this is a consolidation play, but if you're a buyer, effectively, this is done almost a little bit the opposite, right? Like, if you're looking just from a, not a market-facing message perspective, but just as a day-to-day someone who runs programmatic campaigns, if you look at a platform like Clearline, which we partner with, or PubMatic's Activate, which we do as well, or any of the other sort of sell-side buy platforms, for us as a buyer of programmatic, those are one more platform, almost one more DSP that I need to manage, right? So you're creating almost more fragmentation in that sort of buy. I think what's interesting for us and our clients is how do you manage a holistic CTV campaign? Because the reality is no one has 100% of CTV supply. We still see if you need to run a scaled national CTV campaign, you've got to run anywhere between 3 and 8 platforms. And that isn't sort of consolidating. That's actually probably fragmenting more. That's not to say those trends are good or bad, because SPO is important and consolidation and sort of efficiency is massively important. But that doesn't necessarily make things simpler for an advertiser.
You mentioned how you need to have more and more platforms to get the reach you want. You're seeing a lot more big players get into advertising in a big way now. What effect has that had on the market? Has it been positive, or where are things going?
In terms of?
Just the amount of advertising inventory available in streaming all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We talk a lot about how TV is a supply-constrained environment, and I think that messaging has moved into CTV as well. And the reality is it's true on the premium content end, right? Like when you start to talk about, how do I run against Westworld or, Sopranos or tier 1 sort of content, that supply is definitely constrained. I think what's interesting for us is we've seen consumers adopt forms of television advertising or forms of television viewing on CTV that are much less, that have much more flexibility around ad minutes per hour. So especially around formats like FAST and AVOD, you're less in the 3 to 4 to 5 minutes per hour range. You're more in the 10, 12, 14 minutes per hour range. And so, in those worlds, we see actually quite a bit of supply. And actually, in most cases, there's the opposite balance where, the supply exceeds the demand in many cases. As a consumer, the way I look at it is, if I open up my favorite fast choice, I won't name one, right? And I'm watching an hour of TV, there's probably 2/3 of those ad pods that aren't sold through. And I would argue that's a pretty common sort of experience for consumers. And so that's not great on the consumer side. It's not great on the advertiser side. But I think the big thing is, it really is about what types of inventory are you looking at on CTV, because some are less constrained than others, I would say.
Lastly, your company has been pretty active in the political advertising space. Are we looking? We're heading towards an election year already. Are we looking at where we're going to see the first true CTV election?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And to be honest, even the 22 cycle for us, which is an off year, we saw a really big sort of increase in CTV. The big thing that we saw at that point was we had campaigns going, I want to get really targeted in these sets of regions, targeted down to the individual local election level. And CTV scale at that sort of level was constrained in the 20 cycle for sure, less than the 22 cycle. And now as we look forward to the 24 cycle, we're going, all right, let's reach out to all the fast players and understand their scale in each market, the AVOD players, the SVOD players, et cetera. We're seeing a ton more local supply hit the market. And so I think that's pretty exciting. It's also on, trend with the really successful, fundraise that a player like Mad Hive had, right, with local CTV advertising. We think that's a trend that's going to help the election for sure.